An Arab millionaire threw his engagement ring to a poor woman on the streets of Dubai. Her unexpected reaction left him completely speechless. That simple gesture sparked an unlikely bond between two worlds so different. The glittering skyline of Dubai painted a deceptive picture of perfection against the velvet night sky. Amidst the opulence of the Burj Al Arab, the world's most luxurious hotel, Zayn al-Rashid sat across from his fiancée, Amira, his heart pounding with anticipation. The weight of the diamond ring in his pocket felt like an anchor, grounding him to this moment he had meticulously planned for months. Zayn, a 35-year-old real estate mogul, had orchestrated every detail of this evening. From the private dining room overlooking the Arabian Gulf to the custom-made menu featuring Amira's favorite delicacies, no expense had been spared. As he watched her delicate fingers wrap around the stem of her crystal champagne flute, he couldn't help but marvel at how far he had come. Just 5 years ago, Zayn had been at rock bottom. His meteoric rise in Dubai's cutthroat business world had been matched only by his spectacular fall from grace. A series of questionable financial decisions had left his reputation in tatters and his family name tarnished. He had spent 2 years in confinement, not behind bars, but in the gilded cage of his family's disapproval and societal judgment. Amira had been his beacon of hope during those dark times. The daughter of a prominent Emirati family, she had stood by him when others turned their backs. Her unwavering support had given him the strength to rebuild his empire brick by painstaking brick. Now, as he prepared to ask for her hand in marriage, Zayn felt he was finally on the cusp of true redemption. "Amira," Zayn began, his voice low and filled with emotion. "These past few years have been a journey I never expected to take. But through it all, you've been my constant, my—" "Zayn," Amira interrupted, her perfectly manicured hand reaching across the table to stop his. "Before you continue, there's something I need to say." The seriousness in her tone made Zayn's heart skip a beat. He watched as Amira's eyes, usually warm and inviting, turned cold and distant. "I can't do this anymore," she said, her words slicing through the air like a sharpened blade. "I thought I could, for the sake of our families, for the sake of appearances, but I can't keep pretending." Zayn felt the world tilt beneath him. "Pretending? Amira, what are you talking about?" "This charade, Zayn. This relationship." Amira's voice was steady, devoid of the affection he had grown accustomed to. "I stayed with you because it was expected of me, because everyone said you would bounce back, that you just needed time. But the truth is, I don't love you. I don't think I ever did." The words hit Zayn like physical blows. He struggled to breathe, to comprehend the sudden unraveling of everything he believed to be true. "But all these years, why now?" he managed to choke out. Amira's gaze didn't waver. "Because I know what tonight means. I've seen the way you've been acting, the secretive phone calls, the nervous energy. You were going to propose, weren't you?" Zayn's hand instinctively went to his pocket, feeling the outline of the ring box that now seemed to burn against his thigh. "I couldn't let you go through with it," Amira continued, her voice softening slightly. "It wouldn't be fair to either of us. You deserve someone who truly loves you, Zayn. And I deserve to be true to myself." As if on cue, a commotion near the entrance of the restaurant caught their attention. Zayn turned to see a tall, handsome man being escorted to a nearby table. The recognition hit him like a physical blow. It was Hassan, Amira's childhood friend and the son of her father's business partner. The pieces fell into place with brutal clarity. The secret smiles, the hushed phone conversations, the unexplained absences. It all made sense now. Amira hadn't just fallen out of love with him, she had never been in love with him at all. "I'm sorry, Zayn," Amira said, rising from her seat. "I truly am. I hope that one day you can forgive me." With those parting words, she walked away, her silk gown shimmering under the chandeliers as she made her way to Hassan's table. Zayn watched, frozen in his seat, as the woman he thought was his future embraced another man with unmistakable intimacy. The murmurs and stares of nearby diners began to penetrate the fog of his shock. Whispers of "Isn't that Zayn al-Rashid?" and "Poor man, how embarrassing," reached his ears, each word a fresh wound to his already battered ego. Unable to bear the pitying glances and poorly concealed gossip any longer, Zayn stood abruptly. He threw a handful of high-denomination bills on the table, far more than necessary for their barely touched meal. and strode out of the restaurant, his head held high, despite the turmoil raging within him. As he stepped out into the warm Dubai night, Zain felt like a man unmoored. The carefully constructed facade of his life had crumbled in a matter of minutes, leaving him exposed and vulnerable. He loosened his tie, feeling as though he might suffocate under the weight of his humiliation. Without a clear destination in mind, Zain began to walk. He passed gleaming skyscrapers and luxury boutiques, the very symbols of the world he had fought so hard to rejoin. Now they seemed to mock him, their reflective surfaces mirroring back his failure and rejection. As he wandered further from the city's glittering center, the landscape began to change. The immaculate sidewalks gave way to dusty streets, the towering architectural marvels replaced by more modest structures. Zain found himself in a part of Dubai rarely seen by tourists or featured in glossy magazines, a neighborhood where the city's less fortunate residents eked out their existence in the shadow of unimaginable wealth. It was here, amidst the stark reality of life's inequalities, that Zain's emotions finally overwhelmed him. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the ring box, opening it to reveal the stunning diamond within. This ring, which was supposed to symbolize his triumphant return to society's upper echelons, now felt like nothing more than a gaudy reminder of his naivety. In a moment of raw anguish, Zain pulled back his arm and hurled the ring with all his might. It arced through the air, glinting briefly under the streetlights before disappearing into the darkness. As soon as it left his hand, regret washed over him. It wasn't just a ring he had thrown away, but the last vestiges of the life he had been desperately clinging to. A soft gasp drew his attention. Zain turned to see a young woman standing a few feet away, her eyes wide with shock. She was dressed simply, her clothes worn but clean, a stark contrast to the opulence Zain had surrounded himself with. In her hand, glittering incongruously against her calloused palm, was his discarded engagement ring. Their eyes met, and in that moment, something shifted in the universe. Neither Zain nor the young woman could have known it then, but this chance encounter on a dusty street in Dubai was about to change both their lives forever. As they stood there, frozen in a tableau of contrasts, wealth and poverty, despair and hope, endings and beginnings, the city around them seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what would unfold next in this most unexpected of meetings. The young woman's eyes darted between Zain and the ring in her hand, a mix of confusion and indignation playing across her face. In the dim light of the street lamp, Zain could see the sharp angles of her cheekbones, testament to a life far removed from the abundance he knew. "What is this?" she demanded, her voice carrying a strength that belied her slight frame. Some kind of joke? Zain, still reeling from the events of the evening, found himself at a loss for words. The absurdity of the situation, him in his tailored suit, standing in one of Dubai's poorest neighborhoods, facing a woman holding the very symbol of his shattered dreams, was not lost on him. I'm sorry," he managed to stammer. "I didn't mean to—" "You didn't mean to what?" She cut him off, taking a step closer. "Throw away something worth more than what most people here make in a year? Or did you not mean for someone like me to catch it?" Her words stung, piercing through the fog of self-pity that had enveloped Zain. For the first time that night, he truly looked at someone other than himself. The woman before him couldn't have been more than 25, but her eyes held a wisdom born of hardship. Her clothes, though simple, were clean and well-maintained, a sign of dignity in the face of adversity. Despite the late hour, there was an alertness about her, as if she was always ready for whatever challenge life might throw her way. "You're right," Zain said softly, surprising himself with his honesty. "I didn't think, I lost everything tonight. That ring, it represented all my hopes, my future. And now—" He trailed off, unable to articulate the depth of his loss. The young woman's expression softened slightly, but her guard remained up. "Lost everything," she repeated, a hint of disbelief in her tone. "You're standing here in shoes that could feed a family for a month, and you're telling me you've lost everything." Her words hit Zain like a slap in the face. He looked down at his handmade Italian leather shoes, then back at the woman's worn sandals. The contrast was stark, undeniable. You're right," he admitted, feeling a strange mix of shame and relief at finally being confronted with the truth. "I haven't lost everything. Not really. I've lost what I thought was my future, my chance at redemption. But you're right. I still have More than most. The woman studied him for a moment, her eyes narrowing, as if trying to decipher a complex puzzle. Redemption? She echoed. From what? Zayn hesitated. He had spent years carefully crafting his image, burying his past beneath layers of success and carefully worded explanations. But standing here, in this unfamiliar part of the city he called home, those carefully constructed walls began to crumble. I made mistakes, he said finally. Big ones. I hurt people, not physically, but I destroyed lives with my greed. I spent 2 years paying for it, trying to make amends. I thought I had finally succeeded, that I had won back everything I lost. But tonight, he gestured helplessly, unable to find the words to describe the humiliation he had experienced. The woman listened, her expression unreadable. Then, to Zayn's surprise, she let out a short, bitter laugh. You know what's funny? She said, her voice tinged with irony. I made a choice too, one that cost me everything. But unlike you, I didn't destroy lives. I saved one, my own. Intrigued, despite his own turmoil, Zayn found himself asking, What do you mean? The woman's posture stiffened as if bracing herself against painful memories. I refused an arranged marriage, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, to a man who would have hurt me. My family, they couldn't understand. In their eyes, I brought shame to them. So they cast me out. No money, no support, nothing. Just the clothes on my back and the strength in my hands. Her words hung in the air between them, a testament to the complexities of their society, where tradition and progress often clashed with devastating consequences. I'm sorry, Zayn said, and he meant it. For the first time that night, he felt something other than self-pity, a genuine empathy for someone else's pain. The woman shrugged, a gesture that spoke volumes about her resilience. Don't be. I made my choice just like you made yours. We both lost something, but we're still here, aren't we? Her words, simple yet profound, resonated with Zayn. They were indeed still here, standing under the same sky, breathing the same air, despite the vastly different paths that had led them to this moment. I'm Zayn, he said, extending his hand in a gesture that felt both formal and deeply personal. She hesitated for a moment before taking it. Nadia, she replied, her grip firm and unapologetic. As their hands met, Zayn felt a jolt of something. Not attraction, not in the conventional sense, but a recognition. A sense that this encounter, as strange and unexpected as it was, held significance. The ring, Nadia said suddenly, holding it up. The diamond caught the light, sending prismatic reflections dancing across their faces. What do you want to do with it? Zayn looked at the ring, the symbol of all he had lost and all he had been chasing. In that moment, he made a decision that would alter the course of both their lives. Keep it, he said, surprising himself as much as Nadia. Her eyes widened in disbelief. What? No, I can't. Please, Zayn interrupted. Think of it as a new beginning, for both of us. Nadia stared at him, then at the ring, conflicting emotions playing across her face. You're crazy, she said finally, but there was no malice in her tone. You don't even know me. No, Zayn agreed. I don't. But maybe that's the point. Maybe we both need something unexpected in our lives right now. A moment of silence stretched between them, filled with the ambient sounds of the city. Distant car horns, the hum of air conditioners, the faint call to prayer from a nearby mosque. In this pocket of quiet amidst the urban symphony, two strangers from vastly different worlds contemplated the strange twist of fate that had brought them together. Finally, Nadia nodded, closing her fingers around the ring. Okay, she said softly, but on one condition. Name it, Zayn replied, curious. Tell me your story, Nadia said, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that took his breath away. The real story, not the sanitized version you tell at cocktail parties. I want to know how a man who looks like he has everything could end up throwing away a fortune on a street corner. Zayn hesitated, years of careful image management warring with a sudden, inexplicable desire for honesty. In Nadia's direct gaze, he saw no judgment, only a genuine curiosity and perhaps a glimmer of understanding. It's a long story, he warned. Nadia gestured to a small, modest cafe across the street, its windows still lit despite the late hour. I've got time, she said simply. As they crossed the street, an unlikely pair brought together by chance and desperation. Neither Zain nor Nadia could have predicted the journey they were about to embark upon. In that moment, with the weight of the ring in Nadia's pocket and the burden of secrets about to be shared, the first threads of an extraordinary connection began to weave themselves into existence. The cafe door closed behind them, shutting out the night and opening a new chapter in both their lives. As they settled into a corner booth, the aroma of strong Arabic coffee filling the air, Zain took a deep breath and began to speak, unaware that his words were about to set in motion a series of events that would challenge everything he thought he knew about wealth, happiness, and redemption. The small cafe was a world away from the opulent restaurants Zain frequented. Mismatched chairs surrounded worn wooden tables, and the walls were adorned with faded photographs of old Dubai. Despite its humble appearance, the place had a warmth that Zain found oddly comforting. As the elderly owner shuffled over with 2 steaming cups of kawa, Zain took a deep breath, the rich aroma of cardamom-infused coffee filling his senses. Across from him, Nadia waited patiently, her fingers absently tracing the rim of her cup. "I don't know where to begin," Zain admitted, his usual eloquence deserting him. Nadia's eyes met his, steady and unwavering. "The beginning is usually a good place," she said, a hint of a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Zain nodded, gathering his thoughts. "I was born into privilege," he started, his voice low. "The Al-Rashid name opened doors before I could even walk. My father built an empire from nothing, and I was raised to believe that I was destined for greatness." As he spoke, memories flooded back, of opulent parties, private jets, and the constant pressure to live up to the family name. "I was groomed to take over the family business from a young age. Every decision, every friendship, every moment of my life was scrutinized and shaped to fit the mold of the perfect heir." Nadia listened intently, her expression a mix of curiosity and something else. Was it empathy? Understanding? Zain couldn't quite place it. "When I turned 25, my father gave me control of a small division of the company. It was a test," he said, "to prove my worth." Zain's hands clenched involuntarily around his coffee cup. "I was determined to exceed his expectations, to show that I could not only maintain what he had built, but expand it beyond his wildest dreams." He paused, taking a sip of the strong coffee. The bitterness on his tongue matched the regret in his voice as he continued. "I became obsessed with success. Every deal had to be bigger, every profit margin wider. I started cutting corners, taking risks that I knew were dangerous." Nadia leaned forward slightly, her eyes never leaving Zain's face. "What kind of risks?" she asked softly. Zain hesitated, years of carefully guarding his secrets warring with an unexpected desire for honesty. I manipulated financial records," he admitted, the words feeling like gravel in his throat. "I bribed officials, made deals with people I knew were involved in questionable activities, all in the name of growth, of proving myself." He expected to see judgment or disgust in Nadia's eyes, but instead he found only a quiet understanding. Emboldened, he continued, "For a while it worked. The division flourished under my leadership. My father was proud, the board was impressed, and I felt invincible." Zain's voice grew bitter. But then it all came crashing down. He recounted the fateful day when his carefully constructed house of cards began to crumble. An audit uncovered discrepancies. Whispers of impropriety turned into shouts. And suddenly, the golden boy of Dubai's business world found himself at the center of a scandal that threatened to destroy everything his family had built. "I wasn't arrested," Zain said, his voice barely above a whisper. "My family's influence ensured that, but the price of that protection was steep. I was essentially placed under house arrest for 2 years, cut off from the world while my father and his team worked tirelessly to salvage what they could of our reputation." Nadia's hand, which had been resting on the table, twitched slightly, as if she had to stop herself from reaching out to him. 2 years in isolation," she mused. "That must have been difficult." Zain let out a humorless laugh. "Difficult doesn't begin to describe it. I lost friends, business partners, my social standing. Everything that I thought defined me was stripped away. But the worst part was the disappointment in my father's eyes, the knowledge that I had nearly destroyed his life's work." He fell silent for a moment, lost in the painful memories. When he spoke again, his voice was tinged with a mix of determination and lingering shame. When I was finally allowed to rejoin society, I vowed to make things right, to rebuild not just my wealth, but my integrity. I thought that if I could regain my status, prove that I had changed, everything would be okay. Nadia nodded slowly, processing his words. And that's what led you to tonight? Tao, the woman who rejected you. Zain winced at the reminder of Amira's rejection. Yes, Amira was... She represented everything I thought I needed. The perfect partner to complete my redemption story. I convinced myself that marrying her would be the final piece in rebuilding my life. But she didn't want to be a piece in your redemption puzzle, Nadia concluded, her voice gentle but firm. No, she didn't, Zain agreed, the pain of the realization still fresh. And now I'm wondering if anything I've done in the past 5 years has been genuine, or if it's all been part of some elaborate performance to convince the world, and myself, that I've changed. A comfortable silence fell between them as Nadia absorbed Zain's story. Outside, the first hints of dawn were beginning to lighten the sky, the muezzin's call to Fajr prayer drifting through the air. Finally, Nadia spoke. You know, Zain, I think you and I have more in common than either of us realized. Zain looked at her quizzically. How so? We've both been trying to live up to expectations that were never truly our own, she said, her eyes distant as if looking into her own past. You with your family's legacy, me with the traditions of my community. We both made choices that cost us dearly, but perhaps they were the choices we needed to make to become who we really are. Her words struck a chord deep within Zain. For the first time, he began to see his journey not as a fall from grace followed by a desperate climb back to the top, but as a necessary path towards self-discovery. But how do you know who you really are? Zain asked, voicing the question that had been nagging at him throughout their conversation. Nadia's lips curved into a small, sad smile. I don't think we ever know for sure. But I believe it starts with being honest, with ourselves and with others, like you've been tonight. As if to punctuate her words, the first rays of sunlight began to stream through the cafe's windows, casting a warm glow over their table. Zain found himself marveling at the symbolism, a new day dawning as he shed light on the darkest parts of his past. Thank you, he said softly, surprising himself with the depth of gratitude he felt towards this stranger, who had listened without judgment. Nadia nodded, then reached into her pocket and pulled out the ring. She placed it on the table between them, the diamond catching the early morning light. So what now, she asked. What does Zain al-Rashid do when he's not trying to be the person everyone expects him to be? It was a loaded question, one that Zain realized he had never truly considered before. As he looked at the ring, the symbol of his past aspirations, and then at Nadia, an unexpected catalyst for change, he felt a spark of something he hadn't experienced in years, genuine excitement for the future. I don't know, he admitted, a small smile tugging at his lips. But I think I'd like to find out. And something tells me you might have some insights to offer on living life on your own terms. Nadia's eyes lit up with a mix of challenge and amusement. Oh, I might have a few ideas, she said, leaning back in her chair. But are you sure you're ready for that, Mr. Al-Rashid? It's a far cry from the world you're used to. As the cafe began to stir with the first customers of the day, Zain and Nadia found themselves on the precipice of something new and undefined. The unlikely pair, a fallen business tycoon and a young woman who had defied societal norms, sat across from each other, the diamond ring between them a glittering reminder of the unexpected turns life can take. Little did they know that their chance encounter was about to set in motion a series of events that would challenge them both in ways they could never have imagined, forcing them to confront their pasts, question their presents, and reimagine their futures in the dazzling, complex city they both called home. The bustling streets of Dubai were coming to life as Zain and Nadia stepped out of the small cafe. The contrast between the quiet intimacy of their conversation and the vibrant energy of the awakening city was jarring. Zain blinked in the bright morning sunlight, feeling as though he had emerged from a cocoon of introspection into a world that suddenly seemed both familiar and foreign. So, Nadia said, squinting up at him, what does a disgraced tycoon do at 6 a.m. on a workday? The question caught Zain off guard. For the first time in years, he didn't have a meticulously planned schedule to fall back on. The realization was both terrifying and exhilarating. I'm not sure, he admitted, a hint of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "What does a rebellious traditionalist do?" Nadia laughed, the sound bright and unexpected in the early morning air. "Usually, I'd be heading to the market to set up my stall. But today," she paused, a mischievous glint in her eye, "today, I think I'll play hooky. Care to join me in a day of aimless wandering, Mr. Al-Rashid?" The old Zayn would have balked at the idea. Aimless wandering was not in his vocabulary. But standing there, with the weight of his confession still fresh and the promise of a new perspective beckoning, he found himself nodding. "Lead the way," he said, gesturing grandly. As they set off, Zayn couldn't help but notice the curious glances thrown their way. They made an odd pair, him in his rumpled designer suit, Nadia in her simple, practical clothing. But for once he found he didn't care about appearances. Their first stop was a small bakery tucked away in a side street. The aroma of freshly baked bread and za'atar spices wafted out, making Zayn's stomach growl. He realized he hadn't eaten since the disastrous dinner the night before. "Best manakish in Dubai," Nadia declared, leading him inside. The baker, an elderly man with kind eyes, greeted Nadia warmly. "Ah, Nadia, your usual?" he asked, already reaching for a flatbread. "Yes, please, and one for my friend here," she replied, nudging Zayn forward. As they sat on a bench outside the bakery, savoring the warm, herb-laden bread, Zayn found himself transported. The simple pleasure of street food, something he had long since abandoned for haute cuisine, was a revelation. "This is incredible," he mumbled through a mouthful of manakish. Nadia grinned. "See? Some of life's best experiences don't come with a price tag." As the morning wore on, Nadia led Zayn through a Dubai he had never known existed. They wandered through bustling souks, where the air was thick with the scent of spices and the chatter of a dozen languages. In a tiny workshop, they watched a craftsman create intricate wooden lattices, his hands moving with a precision born of years of practice. At each stop, Zayn found himself captivated not just by the sights and sounds, but by Nadia's perspective. She knew the stories behind the storefronts, the dreams and struggles of the people who made up the beating heart of the city. "How do you know all this?" he asked, as they paused to watch a group of children play cricket in a narrow alley. Nadia's eyes softened. "When you live on the fringes, you learn to see the world differently. These people, these places, they're not just backdrops. They're the real Dubai, the one that keeps going no matter what glittering skyscraper goes up next." Her words struck a chord in Zayn. He had spent so long viewing the city as a playground for the wealthy, a backdrop for business deals and social climbing. Now through Nadia's eyes he was seeing its soul. As the day wore on, they found themselves in a small park, a rare patch of green amidst the urban landscape. They sat on a bench, watching as families picnicked and office workers hurried by on their lunch breaks. "You know," Zayn said, breaking a comfortable silence, "I don't think I've spent a day like this, ever." Nadia raised an eyebrow. "No aimless wandering in the Al-Rashid household?" Zayn chuckled, but there was a tinge of sadness in his voice. "Hardly. Every minute was accounted for. Even leisure was scheduled and purposeful." "And now?" Nadia prompted gently. Zayn took a deep breath, looking out over the park. "Now, I'm not sure. For so long, I've defined myself by my goals, by what I could achieve. But after last night, after today, I'm starting to wonder if I've been chasing the wrong things." Nadia nodded thoughtfully. "It's not easy, is it? Redefining yourself. When I left my family, I thought the hardest part would be surviving on my own. But the real challenge? It was figuring out who I was when I wasn't somebody's daughter, or future wife, or disappointment." Her candor touched something deep within Zayn. "How did you do it?" he asked, genuinely curious. Nadia's lips curved into a small smile. "One day at a time. I tried new things, met new people, allowed myself to make mistakes. It wasn't always easy, but it was freeing." As she spoke, Zayn found himself studying her profile. In the soft afternoon light, he saw not just the strength that had first caught his attention, but a vulnerability that made her all the more real. "I think," he said slowly, "that I'd like to try that. The whole one day at a time thing." Nadia turned to him, her eyes sparkling with a mix of challenge and encouragement. "Well, why not start now? What's something Zayn al-Rashid, the man, not the businessman or the socialite, wants to do?" Zayn paused, considering. For a moment he felt lost. But then, a memory surfaced, a long-forgotten dream from his childhood. I always wanted to learn photography, he admitted, feeling almost shy. To capture moments, to see the world through a different lens, but it wasn't considered a suitable hobby for someone of my position. Nadia's face lit up. Photography? That's perfect. Come on, she said, standing up abruptly and holding out her hand. Zayn looked at her outstretched hand, then back at her face. Where are we going? To get you a camera, of course, Nadia replied, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. There's a great little shop I know, nothing fancy, but they have good second-hand gear, perfect for a beginner. For a moment, Zayn hesitated. The idea of buying second-hand anything was foreign to him, but as he looked at Nadia's expectant face, he felt a surge of excitement. With a grin, he took her hand and allowed her to pull him to his feet. As they set off towards the camera shop, weaving through the afternoon crowds, Zayn felt a sense of lightness he hadn't experienced in years. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't Zayn al-Rashid, heir to an empire or social pariah. He was just Zayn, a man on the cusp of discovering a new passion. Little did he know that this small step, buying a second-hand camera in a tiny shop, would be the catalyst for a journey that would challenge everything he thought he knew about himself, success, and the city he called home. As the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the bustling streets of Dubai, Zayn and Nadia continued their unlikely adventure. The diamond ring, still in Nadia's pocket, seemed to pulse with potential, a tangible reminder of the unexpected turns life can take and the new beginnings that can arise from moments of crisis. The small camera shop was a far cry from the sleek electronics stores Zayn was accustomed to. Cramped shelves lined the walls, packed with an eclectic array of photographic equipment spanning decades. The air was thick with the scent of old leather and metal, a tangible reminder of the countless moments these cameras had captured. As they entered, an elderly man looked up from behind the counter, his weathered face breaking into a warm smile at the sight of Nadia. "Ah, my dear, what brings you here today?" "Hello, Mr. Faisal," Nadia greeted warmly. "My friend here is interested in learning photography. We're looking for a good beginner's camera." Mr. Faisal's eyes twinkled as they settled on Zayn, taking in his expensive, if rumpled, attire. "A beginner, you say? Well, we have just the thing." As the old shopkeeper rummaged through his inventory, Zayn found himself drawn to a display case. Inside, a collection of vintage cameras sat like silent sentinels, their brass and leather bodies speaking of a bygone era. "Beautiful, aren't they?" Mr. Faisal said, noticing Zayn's interest. "Each one has a story to tell." Zayn nodded, captivated. "They're incredible. So different from the digital cameras I'm used to seeing." Mr. Faisal chuckled. "Ah, digital. It has its place, of course. But there's something special about film. It teaches you patience, makes you think before you shoot." He paused, then asked, "Would you like to try one?" Before Zayn could respond, Nadia chimed in. "Yes, he would," she said, grinning at Zayn's surprised expression. Mr. Faisal nodded approvingly and carefully extracted a camera from the case. "This is a Leica M3, he explained, handling the camera with reverence. "A true classic, simple, reliable, and capable of producing stunning images in the right hands." As Mr. Faisal walked Zayn through the basics of loading film and adjusting settings, Nadia watched with amusement. The man who had been drowning in self-pity just hours ago was now fully engrossed, his eyes shining with childlike curiosity. After a brief lesson and some practice with the camera, Zayn looked up at Mr. Faisal. "I'll take it," he said decisively. As Mr. Faisal wrapped up the camera and a few rolls of film, Zayn reached for his wallet. But before he could pull out his credit card, Nadia placed a hand on his arm. "Remember what we talked about," she said softly. "New experiences? New perspective?" Zayn paused, then nodded in understanding. He turned to Mr. Faisal. "Would it be possible to work out a payment plan?" he asked, the words feeling foreign on his tongue. Mr. Faisal's eyebrows rose in surprise, but he quickly recovered. "So of course, my boy, we can arrange something suitable." As they left the shop, Zayn felt a strange mix of excitement and trepidation. The camera bag slung over his shoulder felt like a badge of honor, a symbol of his first step into uncharted territory. "So, photographer," Nadia said, nudging him playfully, "where to now?" Zayn looked around, seeing the city with new eyes. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the streets, creating a play of light and dark that he had never truly appreciated before. "I think," he said slowly, "I'd like to just walk and see what I can capture." Nadia's face lit up with approval. "Now you're getting it." They spent the next few hours wandering through the city, Zayn stopping frequently to frame shots. He photographed everything, from the grand architecture of modern Dubai to the weathered faces of shopkeepers in the old souks. With each click of the shutter, he felt a small thrill, a sense of creating something uniquely his own. As the sun began to set, they found themselves at the edge of Dubai Creek. The water glowed golden in the fading light, dhows and abras crisscrossing its surface in a timeless dance. Zayn raised his camera, carefully composing a shot of a weathered dhow captain steering his vessel. As he pressed the shutter, he felt a sense of connection, not just to the moment but to the city itself. "You know," he said, lowering the camera, "I've lived here my entire life, but I feel like I'm seeing Dubai for the first time." Nadia nodded, her eyes on the horizon. "That's the magic of photography. It forces you to slow down, to really look at the world around you." As they stood there watching the city transition from day to night, Zayn felt a profound shift within himself. The weight of expectations of his past mistakes and future anxieties seemed to lift, if only for a moment. "Thank you," he said softly, turning to Nadia. "For today. For everything." Nadia smiled, a gentle, understanding expression. "You're welcome. But remember, this is just the beginning. Real change, real growth. It takes time and effort." Zayn nodded, his expression turning serious. "I know, and I'm ready for it. I think I need to step away from my old life for a while. Figure out who I am without all the trappings of wealth and status." "That's a big decision," Nadia said, studying his face. "Are you sure?" Zayn took a deep breath, looking out over the creek. "No," he admitted, "but I'm sure that I can't go back to who I was before. I need to find a new path." As if on cue, his phone buzzed in his pocket. Zayn pulled it out, seeing a flood of missed calls and messages. The reality of his world, temporarily forgotten, came rushing back. "I should probably deal with this," he said, a note of reluctance in his voice. Nadia nodded understandingly. "Of course. Real life has a way of intruding, doesn't it?" As Zayn scrolled through his messages, his expression grew troubled. "It's my father," he said. "He's heard about what happened with Amira. He wants to see me immediately." The weight of his family name, his responsibilities and expectations settled back on Zayn's shoulders. But this time it felt different. He stood a little straighter, his grip on the camera tightening slightly. "Will you be okay?" Nadia asked, concern evident in her voice. Zayn managed a small smile. "I think so. For the first time in a long time, I feel ready. Ready to face whatever comes next." As they prepared to part ways, Zayn hesitated. "Nadia, I'd like to see you again, to talk more, to learn if that's okay with you." Nadia's eyes sparkled with a mix of amusement and warmth. "I'd like that, Zayn. Just remember, no fancy restaurants or exclusive clubs. If you want to continue this journey, it has to be on equal footing." Zayn nodded, a genuine smile spreading across his face. "Deal. How about we meet at the cafe tomorrow? Same time?" "It's a date," Nadia replied, then quickly added with a laugh, "A friend date, that is." As they said their goodbyes, Zayn watched Nadia disappear into the bustling evening crowd. He stood there for a moment, the weight of his new camera grounding him, reminding him of the unexpected turns the day had taken. With a deep breath, he turned and headed towards his family's estate. The Zayn who walked away from the creek was not the same man who had stumbled into that poor neighborhood in despair the night before. He was someone new, or perhaps someone he had always been, finally emerging from behind the facade of wealth and expectation. As he walked, the diamond ring in Nadia's pocket and the film in his camera held the promise of new beginnings. Little did Zayn know that his conversation with his father would set in motion a series of events that would test his newfound resolve and push him to redefine not just himself, but his entire world. The Al Rashid estate loomed before Zayn, its grand gates and manicured gardens a stark contrast to the vibrant, chaotic streets he had spent the day exploring. As he approached, Zain felt the familiar weight of expectation settle on his shoulders, yet the camera bag at his side served as a tangible reminder of the day's revelations, giving him an unexpected sense of strength. The major domo, Ahmed, greeted him at the door with a mix of relief and concern. "Master Zain, your father has been waiting." "He's in his study." Zain nodded, steeling himself for the conversation ahead. As he walked through the opulent hallways, adorned with priceless art and family heirlooms, he couldn't help but see them through his newly awakened photographer's eye. The stark contrasts, the play of light and shadow, it all seemed different now, almost artificial. He paused outside his father's study, taking a deep breath before knocking. "Enter," came the commanding voice of Rashid al-Rashid. Zain stepped into the room, immediately enveloped by the scent of old books and expensive cigars. His father sat behind an imposing desk, his face a mask of stern disapproval. "Sit down, Zain," Rashid said, gesturing to the chair across from him. As Zain took his seat, he noticed the day's newspaper on his father's desk. The society pages opened to a blurry photo of him leaving the restaurant alone the night before. The headline screamed, "Al-Rashid hair jilted." "I assume you can explain this," Rashid began, his voice tight with controlled anger. Zain met his father's gaze, surprised to find that the usual intimidation he felt was muted. "Amira and I are no longer together," he said simply. Rashid's eyes narrowed. "No longer together? Zain, do you have any idea what this means? The merger with her father's company, the social implications?" "I'm aware, father," Zain interrupted, his voice calm but firm. "But Amira made her choice, and I've made mine." Rashid leaned back, studying his son with a mixture of confusion and frustration. "What are you talking about? And where have you been all day? Your office has been trying to reach you. We have the Mubarak deal to finalize." Zain's hand unconsciously went to the camera bag at his side. "I've been exploring the city, seeing things from a new perspective." "A new perspective?" Rashid scoffed. "Zain, we don't have time for this nonsense. You have responsibilities, a legacy to uphold. After everything we went through to restore our family's reputation—" "That's just it, father," Zain interjected, a newfound conviction in his voice. "I've been so focused on restoring our reputation, on living up to your expectations, that I've lost sight of who I am." Rashid's expression softened slightly, a flicker of concern breaking through his stern facade. "Who you are? Zain, you're my son, the heir to the Al-Rashid Empire. That's who you are." Zain shook his head, choosing his words carefully. "I'm more than that, father. Or at least I want to be. I've spent so long trying to be the perfect son, the perfect businessman, that I've forgotten how to just be me." He reached into his bag and pulled out the Leica, setting it gently on the desk between them. Rashid's eyebrows rose in surprise. "A camera?" he asked, puzzled. Zain nodded, a small smile playing at his lips. "I've decided to learn photography, to see the world through a different lens, quite literally." Rashid's face clouded with confusion and a hint of disappointment. "Photography? Zain, this is hardly the time for hobbies. We have a business to run, deals to close." "I know, father," Zain said, his voice firm but respectful, "and I'm not abandoning my responsibilities, but I need some time. Time to figure out who I am beyond the Al-Rashid name." Rashid stood abruptly, pacing behind his desk. "Time? Zain, the business world doesn't stop just because you're having an existential crisis. Your actions affect more than just yourself. There are employees, partners, shareholders to consider." Zain listened, feeling a familiar guilt creep in. But then he remembered Nadia's words, the simple joy of capturing moments through his lens, and he found his resolve strengthening. "I understand that, father, but I can't keep living solely for the expectations of others. I need to find my own path." Rashid stopped pacing, turning to face his son with a mix of exasperation and concern. "And what exactly does this path entail? Are you planning to abandon everything we've built?" Zain shook his head. "No, not abandon, but step back for a while. I want to explore the city, to understand the people we supposedly serve with our business. I want to use this," he gestured to the camera, "to capture the real Dubai, not just the glittering facade we present to the world." A heavy silence fell between them. Rashid studied his son, seeing something in Zain's eyes that he hadn't noticed before. A quiet determination, a spark of passion that had been missing for years. Finally, Rashid sighed, his shoulders sagging slightly. "You're serious about this, aren't you?" Zain nodded, meeting his father's gaze steadily. "I am. I need to do this, father." "For myself." Rashid returned to his seat, his expression thoughtful. "And what of your responsibilities here? The deals we're working on? The day-to-day operations?" "I'll still be involved," Zain assured him. "But perhaps in a different capacity. I could focus on our community outreach programs, use my photography to highlight the impact of our projects. It might even help improve our public image." Rashid considered this, drumming his fingers on the desk. "It's unconventional," he mused. "The board won't like it." "Since when have you cared what the board thinks?" Zain asked, a hint of his old spark returning. To his surprise, Rashid chuckled. "You have a point." He paused, then asked, "How long?" 3 months, Zain proposed. "Give me 3 months to explore this new direction. If it doesn't work out, I'll return to my full duties." Rashid nodded slowly, coming to a decision. "Very well, 3 months, but I expect regular updates, and you'll need to be available for major decisions and meetings." Zain felt a weight lift from his shoulders. "Thank you, father. I promise I won't let you down." As he stood to leave, Rashid called out, "Zain." He turned back to see his father holding the camera, examining it with curiosity. "This photography, it makes you happy?" Zain smiled, a genuine, unguarded expression that Rashid realized he hadn't seen in years. "Yes, father, it does." Rashid nodded, handing the camera back. "Then I look forward to seeing your work." As Zain left the study, he felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. He had won a reprieve, a chance to explore this new side of himself, but he knew the real challenge was just beginning. Outside the estate, the night air felt fresh and full of possibility. Zain pulled out his phone, sending a quick message to Nadia. "It worked. I have 3 months." "Thank you." As he waited for a response, Zain raised his camera, capturing the play of moonlight on the estate's grand facade. In that moment, standing between two worlds, he felt truly alive. Little did he know that his decision would set in motion a series of events that would challenge not just his own perceptions, but the very foundations of the world he had always known. As the shutter clicked, capturing a moment in time, Zain al-Rashid stood on the precipice of a journey that would redefine his understanding of success, happiness, and the true meaning of legacy. The early morning sun cast long shadows across the streets of Dubai as Zain made his way to the small cafe where he had first opened up to Nadia. He felt a strange mix of excitement and nervousness, like a schoolboy on his first day of class. The weight of the camera around his neck was a comforting reminder of his new purpose. As he rounded the corner, he saw Nadia already seated at an outdoor table, her face hidden behind a worn paperback. The sight of her, so at ease in her surroundings, brought a smile to his face. "Good morning," Zain said as he approached. Nadia looked up, a warm smile spreading across her face. "Well, if it isn't the intrepid photographer, how did it go with your father?" Zain sat down, ordering a coffee from a passing waiter before turning back to Nadia. "Better than I expected, actually. He's given me 3 months to explore this new direction." "That's wonderful," Nadia exclaimed, genuine happiness in her voice. "So, what's the plan?" Before Zain could answer, a shadow fell across their table. He looked up to see a face he hadn't encountered in years, Karim Al-Faisal, his former business partner, and the man who had been at the center of the scandal that had nearly destroyed Zain's life. "Well, well," Karim said, his voice smooth as oil. "Zain al-Rashid, slumming it in the old quarter. How the mighty have fallen." Zain tensed, memories of betrayal and shame flooding back. He felt Nadia's questioning gaze but kept his eyes on Karim. "Karim," Zain said, his voice carefully neutral. "It's been a long time." Karim's eyes flickered to Nadia, then back to Zain, a smirk playing on his lips. "Indeed it has. I see your taste in company has changed." Nadia straightened in her chair, her eyes narrowing at Karim's thinly veiled insult. "And who might you be?" she asked, her tone deceptively light. "Karim Al-Faisal," he replied, not bothering to look at her. "An old friend of Zain's. We used to do business together before he decided to take an extended vacation." Zain's jaw clenched at the reminder of his past troubles. "That's ancient history, Karim. What do you want?" Karim leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I heard about your little falling out with the Haddad family. Tough break, but I might have a proposition for you, a chance to get back on top, for old time's sake." Zain felt a familiar pull, the temptation of quick success, of proving himself once again in the cutthroat world of high finance. But then he felt the weight of the camera around his neck, saw Nadia's concerned face out of the corner of his eye, and found his resolve. "I appreciate the offer, Karim," Zain said, his voice steady, "but I'm exploring new opportunities right now. I'm not interested in any propositions." Karim's face hardened, the friendly facade dropping away. "Don't be a fool, Zain. You know as well as I do that in our world, you're either rising or falling, there's no in-between. Maybe it's time for a new world," Zain replied, surprised by his own boldness. Karim straightened, his eyes cold. "Suit yourself. But remember, Zain, the past has a way of catching up with us all. When you're ready to rejoin the real world, you know where to find me." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving a tense silence in his wake. Nadia waited until Karim was out of earshot before speaking. "So, I'm guessing that's part of the history you mentioned?" Zain nodded, his expression troubled. "Karim was my partner during the time I told you about. The questionable deals, the risks. He was at the center of it all. And now he's back," Nadia mused, "offering you a way back to your old life." "Yes," Zain admitted. "And a part of me was tempted." Nadia reached across the table, her hand covering his. "But you said no, that's what matters." Zain met her eyes, finding strength in her unwavering gaze. "You're right. It's just seeing him brought it all back. The ambition, the drive, the feeling of being on top of the world. And the fall that came after," Nadia reminded him gently. Zain nodded, taking a deep breath. "You're right. I can't go back to that. I won't." A comfortable silence fell between them as they sipped their coffee, each lost in thought. Finally, Nadia spoke up. "So, Mr. Photographer, what's on the agenda for today?" Grateful for the change of subject, Zain pulled out a small notebook. "I've been thinking about what you said, about seeing the real Dubai. I want to start a project, documenting the lives of people in the city's oldest neighborhoods, the stories that don't make it into the glossy tourist brochures." Nadia's eyes lit up. "That's a wonderful idea. But won't that be quite a change from what you're used to?" Zain chuckled. "Absolutely. That's why I was hoping you might be willing to be my guide. Help me navigate these areas. Introduce me to people who might be willing to share their stories." Nadia considered for a moment, then nodded. "I'd be happy to. On one condition." "Name it," Zain said. "You have to promise to show the truth no matter what. No sanitizing, no glossing over the hard parts. These people's stories deserve to be told honestly." Zain held her gaze, understanding the weight of her request. "I promise. No filters, literal or metaphorical." With that, they set off into the winding streets of old Dubai. Zain, with his expensive camera and designer clothes, albeit more casual than his usual attire, drew curious looks from locals. But with Nadia by his side, doors began to open. They visited a small spice shop where the owner, an elderly man named Hassan, regaled them with tales of how Dubai had changed over the decades. Zain listened, fascinated, as he captured images of Hassan's weathered hands sorting through vibrant piles of saffron and cardamom. In a tiny tailor's workshop, they met Amina, a young woman who had taken over her father's business. As she deftly worked her sewing machine, she spoke of her dreams to modernize the shop while maintaining its traditional craftsmanship. Zain's camera clicked away, capturing the determination in her eyes and the skill in her fingers. As the day wore on, Zain found himself overwhelmed by the stories he was hearing, the lives he was glimpsing. It was a side of Dubai he had never truly seen before, despite having lived here his entire life. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the narrow streets, Zain and Nadia found themselves on a rooftop, overlooking the neighborhood. The juxtaposition of the old buildings in the foreground with the glittering skyscrapers in the distance was striking. "Thank you," Zain said softly, lowering his camera, "for today, for all of this. I feel like I'm seeing my city for the first time." Nadia smiled, her eyes on the horizon. "It's always been here, Zain. You just needed to look with new eyes." As they stood there, watching the city transition from day to night, Zain felt a sense of purpose settling over him. He knew the path ahead wouldn't be easy. Karim's reappearance was a stark reminder that his past was never far behind. But for the first time in years, he felt like he was moving in the right direction. Little did he know that the stories he was capturing, the lives he was documenting, would soon intertwine with his own, in ways he could never have imagined. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Zain al-Rashid stood on the precipice of a journey that would challenge not just his photography skills, but his very understanding of wealth, success, and the true cost of progress in a city built on dreams and ambition. Weeks flew by as Zain immersed himself in his photographic project. His days were filled with exploring hidden corners of Dubai, capturing moments that told the stories of the city's unsung heroes. Nights were spent in the makeshift darkroom he had set up in a spare room of his apartment, carefully developing film and printing images that revealed a Dubai far removed from the glossy postcards and tourist brochures. As Zain's collection of photographs grew, so did his understanding of the city he thought he knew. Through his lens, he captured the weathered hands of fishermen mending nets by the creek, the determined eyes of immigrant workers sending money home to their families, and the joy on children's faces as they played in narrow alleyways, oblivious to the towering skyscrapers nearby. Nadia remained a constant presence, guiding him through neighborhoods he had never known existed, introducing him to people whose stories touched him deeply. With each passing day, Zain felt the walls he had built around himself over years of living in the upper echelons of society crumbling away. One particularly hot afternoon, as they walked through a bustling market, Nadia turned to Zain with a thoughtful expression. "You know, you're different now," she said. Zain lowered his camera, raising an eyebrow. "Different how?" Nadia smiled, gesturing around them. "When we first met, you looked at this part of the city like it was another world. Now you move through it like you belong. You see people, not just subjects for your photos." Zain considered her words, realizing the truth in them. "I feel different," he admitted. "It's like I'm finally seeing the whole picture, not just the polished surface." As they continued their walk, Zain's phone buzzed insistently in his pocket. He pulled it out to see his father's name on the screen. With a sigh, he answered. "Father, is everything all right?" Rashid al-Rashid's voice came through, tense and clipped. "Zain, I need you to come to the office immediately. There's a situation with the Mubarak deal." Zain felt a familiar knot of anxiety form in his stomach. "I'll be there as soon as I can," he promised, ending the call. Turning to Nadia, he explained the situation. She nodded understandingly. "Go. Your other world is calling." As Zain rushed to his father's office, he felt like he was straddling two realities. The sleek, air-conditioned interior of the Al-Rashid Tower was a stark contrast to the vibrant, sun-baked streets he had just left. He found his father in the conference room, surrounded by anxious-looking executives. Rashid looked up as Zain entered, relief evident on his face. "Zain, thank goodness. The Mubaraks are threatening to pull out of the deal. They're saying our proposal doesn't adequately address the impact on local communities." Zain listened as his father and the other executives debated strategies, throwing around terms like acceptable losses and necessary sacrifices for progress. But something felt off. The words that once would have seemed normal business jargon now rang hollow. "May I see the proposal?" Zain asked, interrupting a heated discussion. Surprised, Rashid handed over a thick folder. Zain flipped through it, his mind racing. The project was a large-scale development that would transform a historic neighborhood into a modern commercial district. On paper, it looked impressive, but Zain could see what was missing. "We're approaching this all wrong," he said suddenly, looking up from the documents. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to him. Zain took a deep breath and continued. "We're treating this neighborhood like it's just real estate, but it's more than that. It's people's homes, their livelihoods, their history." He pulled out his camera, quickly scrolling through some recent photographs. "Look at this. These are the people who live and work in that area now." He showed them images of shopkeepers, families, street vendors, the vibrant tapestry of life he had been documenting. "If we want this project to succeed, we need to work with the community, not steamroll over them." Rashid stared at his son, a mix of surprise and pride on his face. "What do you suggest?" Zain felt a surge of confidence. "Let's revise the proposal. Instead of tearing everything down, we integrate the new development with the existing structures. Preserve the historic buildings. create spaces for local businesses. We could even showcase the neighborhood's history as part of the attraction. The room buzzed with discussion. Some executives looked skeptical, others intrigued. Rashid studied his son for a long moment before nodding. "It's an unconventional approach," he said slowly, "but it might just work. Zain, I want you to lead this revision. You seem to have insights the rest of us lack." As the meeting adjourned, Zain felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. He had just committed to bridging his two worlds, the high-stakes business realm he had been groomed for, and the vibrant, complex reality he had been discovering through his lens. Later that evening, as Zain shared the day's events with Nadia over a simple dinner in a small local restaurant, she listened with rapt attention. "You're really going to do this?" she asked, her eyes shining with a mix of admiration and concern. "Change the way your family's company does business?" Zain nodded, feeling both exhilarated and terrified. "I have to try. If I can make them see what I've seen, understand the lives we impact, maybe we can do business in a way that lifts everyone up, not just the wealthy few." Nadia reached across the table, squeezing his hand. "It won't be easy. You'll be fighting against years of entrenched thinking." "I know," Zain acknowledged, "but I have to try. These past weeks, seeing the city through my camera, through your eyes, it's changed me, Nadia. I can't go back to the way things were." As they continued their meal, discussing ideas and possibilities, neither Zain nor Nadia noticed the figure watching them from across the street. Karim Al-Faisal stood in the shadows, his eyes narrowed as he observed the unlikely pair. In his hand he held a phone, a text message glowing on the screen. "The Al-Rashid heir is becoming a problem. Handle it." Karim's lips curled into a cold smile as he pocketed the phone and melted back into the busy street. The game was about to change, and he intended to be the one controlling the board. As the night deepened, Zain and Nadia parted ways, each lost in thoughts of the challenges and possibilities that lay ahead. Zain's camera hung around his neck, a symbol of his new perspective and the tool that had opened his eyes to a different Dubai. Little did he know that the images he had captured, the stories he had begun to tell, were about to become central to a conflict that would test his newfound convictions, challenge his loyalties, and force him to confront the darkest corners of the world he had once been so comfortable in. As Zain walked home, the city lights reflecting off his camera lens, he stood on the precipice of a battle that would determine not just his future, but the future of the Dubai. He was only now beginning to truly understand. The echoes of change he had set in motion were about to become a roar, and Zain al-Rashid would find himself at the very heart of the storm. The Dubai skyline glittered in the evening light as Zain stood before a packed auditorium. 3 months had passed since that fateful night when Amira had rejected him, setting in motion a journey of self-discovery he could never have anticipated. Now, he was about to present the culmination of that journey to the world. The exhibition hall outside was filled with his photographs, raw, honest captures of life in Dubai's oldest neighborhoods, juxtaposed against images of the city's relentless modernization. But it was more than just an art show. It was the public unveiling of the Al-Rashid Group's new approach to urban development, a revolutionary plan that sought to preserve the soul of the city while embracing its future. Zain took a deep breath, his eyes scanning the crowd. He saw his father, Rashid, sitting in the front row, his face a mixture of pride and apprehension. Next to him sat Nadia, her presence a comforting anchor in the sea of business suits and evening gowns. In the back, partially hidden in shadow, Zain caught a glimpse of Karim, his expression unreadable. "Ladies and gentlemen," Zain began, his voice steady despite the butterflies in his stomach, "tonight I want to show you a Dubai you might not have seen before. A Dubai of contrasts and contradictions, of tradition and innovation, of struggles and triumphs." As he spoke, images began to appear on the large screen behind him. A weathered dhow captain steering his vessel across the creek, framed by the towering silhouette of modern skyscrapers. Children playing in narrow alleyways, their laughter seeming to echo off the glass and steel monoliths in the distance. For too long, we in the business world have seen progress only in terms of bigger, newer, more modern, Zain continued. We've built incredible structures, pushed the boundaries of what's possible. But in our rush towards the future, we've sometimes forgotten the very thing that makes Dubai unique. Its people, its history, its soul. He clicked to the next slide, showing the plans for the revised Mubarak project. This is why the Al Rashid Group is proud to announce a new approach to urban development, one that seeks to integrate the new with the old, to lift up communities rather than displace them, to create spaces that honor our past while embracing our future. As Zain delved into the details of the plan, he could see the audience's reaction shifting. Some looked intrigued, others skeptical, but all were engaged, their eyes moving between Zain and the images he presented. "This isn't just about buildings," Zain said, his passion evident in every word. "It's about people. It's about creating a Dubai that doesn't just impress the world, but one that truly serves and represents all of its residents." As he concluded his presentation, the room erupted in applause. Zain felt a wave of relief wash over him, but he knew this was just the beginning. The real work lay ahead. As the formal presentation ended and the guests began to mingle, exploring the photo exhibition, Zain found himself approached by a stream of well-wishers and curious investors. But his eyes kept drifting to where Nadia stood, engaged in animated conversation with his father. Finally managing to break away from the crowd, Zain made his way over to them. As he approached, he heard his father speaking. "Must admit, I had my doubts when Zain first told me about his new perspective, but seeing this, understanding the vision behind it, I'm proud of him. Truly proud." Nadia smiled warmly. "He's come a long way. We all have, I think." Zain cleared his throat, alerting them to his presence. "I hope I'm not interrupting." Rashid turned, clasping his son's shoulder. "Zain, my boy, this is extraordinary. You've given us all a lot to think about." Before Zain could respond, a commotion near the entrance caught their attention. Karim was engaged in a heated argument with security, his voice rising above the murmur of the crowd. "You can't silence the truth," Karim shouted, his face flushed with anger. "The people deserve to know what's really going on." Zain excused himself and quickly made his way over, gesturing for security to stand down. "Karim, what's going on?" Karim turned to him, his eyes blazing. "What's going on? I'll tell you what's going on. While you've been playing photographer, real business has been happening. Deals are being made, Zain, deals that will shape the future of this city, with or without your pretty pictures." Zain felt a chill run down his spine. "What are you talking about?" Karim leaned in, his voice low and menacing. "You think your little project is going to change anything? There are powers at work here that you can't even begin to understand. Powers that will crush your naive idealism like a bug." As Karim spoke, Zain noticed a flash drive falling from his pocket. In a split-second decision, he subtly kicked it under a nearby table out of sight. "Karim," Zain said calmly, "I think you've had too much to drink. Why don't we discuss this somewhere more private?" But Karim was beyond reason. He shoved Zain aside and stormed out of the hall, leaving a wake of whispers and concerned glances behind him. As the excitement died down and the guests began to depart, Zain retrieved the flash drive. He debated for a moment before deciding to view its contents. What he found shocked him to his core. Detailed plans for massive land grabs, evidence of bribery and corruption reaching to the highest levels of government and business. In that moment, Zain realized that his journey was far from over. The transformation he had undergone, the perspective he had gained, had prepared him for this moment. He now faced a choice that would define not just his future, but the future of Dubai itself. As dawn broke over the city, Zain stood on the balcony of his apartment, the flash drive heavy in his hand. Nadia joined him, her presence a silent support. "What will you do?" she asked softly. Zain took a deep breath, his eyes on the horizon where the first rays of sun were painting the sky in hues of gold and pink. "The right thing," he said firmly. "No matter the cost." He turned to Nadia, taking her hand in his. "I couldn't have come this far without you. Will you stand with me for what comes next?" Nadia's grip tightened on his hand, her eyes shining with determination. "Always." As they stood there, the city awakening around them, Zain felt a sense of purpose stronger than anything he had ever known. The journey that had begun with a broken heart and a discarded ring had led him here, to a moment of truth that would reshape his world. With Nadia by his side and the truth in his hands, Zain al-Rashid prepared to face the challenges ahead. He knew the path would be difficult, fraught with danger and opposition, but he also knew that he was no longer alone. He had found not just a new perspective, but a new purpose, a new love, and a new understanding of what truly mattered. As the sun rose fully, bathing Dubai in its warm glow, Zain raised his camera one last time. Through the lens, he saw not just a city of contrasts, but a city of possibilities. And he was ready to fight for its soul, one image, one story, one truth at a time. The end. Dear listeners, we hope Zain's journey of transformation has moved you. To continue this emotional voyage, we've prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories. Find it by clicking to your left. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like the video. Every day we bring unique stories that explore the complexity of life. Don't miss our upcoming content. We look forward to reading your comments.